store? Is there an opportunity on this.com? You know what I mean? And how can you be narrowing your focus?
Do you ever have any challenges? And I guess I asked this more from a morality standpoint. You were in the spirits business, now you're in the cannabis business.
Yes.
But you're such a sweetheart. Like, but I guess at the end of the day, you're a shark. You want to make money. Are there ever any times where you're sitting and you're like,
definitely,
maybe, the businesses I'm in, they're lucrative, but.
Of course. I mean, I would say really just more so for like the amount of energy. I know you had Derek, I think, on last week, and Derek Ferguson was the CFO for many years at Combs Enterprise. He also was like the resident minister. And I would definitely occasionally go in and be like, for all this work I'm doing, I probably could be like saving lives. So I think more so, I absolutely do struggle with like, how could I put this level of energy and making sure like it's real, making sure it's doing the best I can for a community. Now on the flip side, even with Ciroc, I feel very proud of like, I remember going into, when Ciroc Peach launched, it was so big, I went to a liquor store in Atlanta and this guy was like, he was telling me how he had made so much money in 4 months, he was not gonna be able to send his daughter to college. Like the amount of jobs we created, the amount of the next 110 rappers who got deals because of our deal, who were able to each hire 50 people. Like, I feel very good about our contributions in these businesses where we should be represented, right? If they're in American commerce and they're legal, we should be represented. So I feel good about that. But particularly in the cannabis space, I am looking at its early days, but I have been talking to some celebrity talent around. I was like, it's unreasonable, it's ridiculous that in one state somebody's making $100 million and the next state somebody's in jail for the same thing. I was like, we have to figure out, and I think that the work that Reform is doing, what Meek and Jay and Mike Rubin and those guys are doing in prison reform. I was like, we need to help. What happens when you get them out, right? They're doing a lot of the great work of like, how do we get people out of jail for these stupid things they shouldn't be in jail for? But then what? You've been in jail for 6 years for weed, which is ludicrous. Then you come out and now you're at a disadvantage. I was like, where we could help is with that transition. How do you transition either A, from the black market, or B, how do you teach somebody the proper entrepreneurship skills or really advocate for them and make sure they have the right legal support? This is something I talked to Puff about 1.5 years ago. When I first was like, I think I want to leave, he was like, what do you want to do? I was like, the biggest gap I see, honestly, is in legal support. Like, you have people who are going to jail just because they have terrible lawyers. You know what I mean? I was like, we need to figure out and bring back like the feeling of the 1980s Legal Defense Fund, or 1970s really, LABCP, and make sure like you get best in class legal support 8 to people out, and then when they get out, what are they gonna do next? So my dream would really be to, build this thing up, sell it in 3 years, and then I would love to spend the rest of my life just focused on that.
That's amazing, Dia. That's amazing. Just wrapping this thing up, what would you say the biggest impact that Puff has had on your life?
I mean, I think everybody needs somebody to believe in them. And I appreciate the biggest impact, I think, was the trust he had in me to do things I had never done before. Like, we were both new to the spirits industry, and we would just come up with crazy ideas, and for him to be like, yeah, just go do it. It was a wonderful model, and I hope I can emulate it moving forward, for somebody to be like, yeah, I believe in you, and I believe we can do this. Because honestly, in some ways, like, trust is the best investment,
Conversely, what would you say the biggest impact that you've had on Puff's life?
I honestly think he may even say this was, I think I actually did impact his management style. If you go to him now, if you go look to his employees now, like, I think he saw like, she's really getting a lot out of people and being kind at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, understanding how to motivate people by believing in them, by trusting them, finding out what are their strengths, by showing off and showcasing what they are. Like, I would go to my team, like, if somebody was great, I would not try to hide them from being great. I'm like, you're great at this. Like, let's get you, I'm gonna help you get pressed for what you can do. Like explaining how the better people are, the better we all are. Like, I think sometimes it can be scary. I think Puff was much more of a like, I have 100 great people, I want to know where they are and have them dedicated to this one mission, instead of being like, if we got 100 great people and they go out and launch 100 dope companies in the community, then we got 100 allies out here in the world and we changing things. And I think he really has taken that on as a mission. And I feel like he's been so dedicated in the work he's doing with the Revolt Summit now to more of the Reginald F. Lewis model of like, it's not about how many millions I make, it's about how many millionaires I make. And I think he would say that I helped to influence that thinking.
That's amazing. And you bring up something that I think that, I would do this interview a disservice without asking you. Puff is a creature of habit. He really is. And when you do a phenomenal job, when you come into the company and you really kill it at your position, that's where he wants you to stay. He wants, he can rely on you. He knows you do the best job. How did you, just coming off of that last answer that you just said, how did you get him to see you as more again and again and again till you took over all of the businesses?
I think you gotta try to just approach it by like irrefutable science, like continually showing like, this is how this thing has been made better. I could do this same thing. Like it's more of again, like it's a way of doing things than the actual subject matter of like, okay, I built this Ciroc, right? Now you wanna have a television station. Like we just sat when that opportunity came up for Revolt, right? I was like, well, I want to be on the jump. I helped be part of the jump team to get the television, get awarded out of 150 other applicants for it. It was just him and Magic who got selected because of the work that we put together, helped to find a CEO, take off the ground. I never worked in that before. But I think being able to show like this thing worked, now we're going to take this thing, lift it up and build this next thing. And the other thing is like in any relationship, I think you have to make sure that you each have independent value, right? Like the best relationships are when two people come and like you're great, You're great on your own and you're just killing it when you're together. I think it's always been clear, and I've been very clear to him about this, like I choose to be at Combs, you're right, I was like the advocate of like, we're Combs Enterprises now, like we're growing up. We're not just music. I love Bad Boy Records, but now we're going to the next thing, something that I advocated for. I think it was always very transparent, and I've been unabashed about like, I will be good wherever I am. You know what I mean? And I'll be just as happy, selling strawberries or pencils or Ciroc vodka, right? You know what I mean? So like I'm like, and Puff is amazing and he could hire anybody he wants to, right? So I think it's important that before that, it had been a beautiful family environment, but sometimes like you always want to hire your cousins. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it was much more like what's the mutual respect? So I think I was able to continually demonstrate increased value that could be sticky in a variety of scenarios by showing how this thing worked here. Now we're going to lift it and apply it here.
Last couple of questions. What's the best advice you ever received?
I think the best, this is not directly to me, but before I started with Combs Enterprises, I think I was watching something, or Leo Cohen, who's a very well-respected music executive in the industry, was asked to describe Puff. And he said just one thing. He said, he's necessary. And I told, he was my boyfriend at the time, but my husband at the time, I was like, if I'm gonna take this job, I'm gonna figure out how to become necessary, because it's a very different thing to be, you could be liked at your job, doesn't necessarily create value. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily drive your price up. But it's just like, you know what your plumber can charge you if your water don't work and he can fix it? You know what I'm saying? On the way, you know what I mean? Like that's necessary. Like, so I was like, I need to come in a different, think about like, what tool do you need by any means necessary? And for me, that was really valuable. I do a lot of speaking on negotiation, and one thing I tell, again, particularly women, is don't confuse like affection or affinity for value. And I use these, the fruit, grapes as an example. Like most people love grapes. Like most people like grapes. Nobody hates grapes, right, for the most part. But typically, if you go someplace and somebody says like, oh, would you like this mangosteen martini or lychee martini? You may pay a little more for that than you would like a grape flavor thing, because grape feels like an everyday thing, even though you like it better than some sexy fruit that had to be brought in from the Maldives, right? So like, you might just be the grapes at your organization, everybody be like, she's so dope. Oh, you want a raise, girl? Nah. This person who I don't like that much, that's necessary, they getting the raise. But you have to balance being necessary with your likability.
That's great advice.
Okay.
What's the worst advice you ever received?
Well, it's funny. So when I mentioned early on that when I accepted this job, I had all the music labels in New York as my clients. So on my last day at Power 105, you send out the email like, oh, I'm going to a new venture. Here's my new information. I had like literally 2 hours of people calling me because, again, Puff is amazing, but he has a reputation for being tough to work for. And the job actually that I was specifically taking had been like 4 people had failed at it like in the last year. So people were calling me like, don't take that job. You shouldn't go over there, da da da. Like at least 13 people back to back to back. I'm like, I was like, I'm good. It's gonna be good or it's not gonna be good, but I'm gonna be good. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, either way, right? And obviously, I'm glad I didn't listen to any of them, because I would have been, I feel like this was the right move for me.
Trust in yourself and believe in your ability.
Yeah. And be okay with failing. I was okay if it didn't work out. That's the other thing. Like, you gotta be okay with taking the risk of like, maybe it doesn't work. I'll get something out of it and then I'll go do something else.
That's great advice, because so many people don't do because they're afraid of failure. They're afraid to take the risk because they might fail. Last question for you. What advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
I think I kind of touched on this earlier. I think I definitely, because I can see the possibilities in a lot of things, would be willing to be like, oh, we should do this. Yeah, let's think of this idea. Let's start this company. Let's write this book. Let's launch this party. You know what I mean? And you can divide your precious time up too much, chasing too many dreams. I think everything happens for a reason. I'm not one to really look back, but I would say the power of just make a decision and to make that decision the right decision is invaluable.
I always say that there is supreme power in just making a decision. I literally wrote that in the text today. Give it up for this week's Powermove.
Thank you.
What's up, guys? Thanks for sticking with me to the end of the video. Truly appreciate you. If you like anything you heard here today, go ahead and hit that